Greetings to oddity seekers. Welcome to Project Kodawe, part 1 of a 2-part series on how I made this. This is a compound hybrid crossbow with PVC reinforced fiber rod limbs. It is completely made out of scrap metal, and I'm going to show you how I made it. Like I said, this is a 2-part series, so stay tuned and check out part 2. The link to it is below, and hope you enjoy it. We're going to jump right in. Alright, so what I've done here is cut out 3 plates out of the big sheet of aluminum. And what we're going to do is cut out the gun. I don't know if you can see it, but I've kind of roughly drawn out the shape of our pistol. So this will be one plate, there will be a middle plate, and the other plate. So what I'm going to do to start with, I'm going to take the 2 outside plates and put them together and cut out my shape. And then I'll come back a little later and add this plate back in and then draw what shapes I need. But the reason I'm going to do that is because inside of here there's going to be a mechanism for the trigger, which will basically be in this plate. So I thought it'd be best to cut these out first and then come back and cut this other plate to fit the mechanism and the outline where we want it. I think also while I am cutting this, I'm going to attempt to use these clamps to hold the 2 pieces together. Alright, that took about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes on the bandsaw, just to cut this back part of the handle out. So now we got to come around and cut the rest of this out. Guess you see what we did there. Cut off the rest of that. Now we're going to come back and cut out some more. I'm not going to record all this just because it would take up a ton of video time. You get the idea. When I do fabrication, I'm not one of these guys that sits down and draws everything, draws blueprints. I basically see something in my head and then I start fabricating it. So probably run into some stumbling blocks along the way, but this is not, there's no measurements, there's no blueprints. Basically this was an outline of a 9mm Taurus firearm, and I used that as my template to trace out the shape, and then basically I wing it. So to me it's more fun that way. I'm not big into a whole bunch of blueprints and drawings and measurements. I'm still going to have to come back in and do some fine detail. Right here I'd like for it to dip in. We're around the trigger. Right here it kind of dips in. And it flares back out. So we've got all that work to do, and then I'm going to have to drill a hole and figure out how to get that cleaned out. Step drill a bit and come in here and start a couple of holes and work my way down, and then I'll probably have to come back and clean it up somehow with a dribble tool or something. I don't know. We're going to see how that goes. But now I've got to figure out how to come around and cut out the rest of this part. Alright, so just to recap what I did, drilled a hole through there with the drill press, and then I came back with my jigsaw, cut those pieces out, and now we've got our trigger assembly. I'll have to do some shaping in there, but at this point we've got our basic design. Alright, so at this point I went ahead and put it on my wire wheel. I have a little wire wheel on my grinder, and I cleaned it up a little bit. Just, oh, I forgot one side. I have to go back and clean that up. It used to look like that, and once we wire wheel it, we start getting a little shine on it. My next step is to start working on the trigger mechanism. Alright, next part is going to be to do the trigger mechanism. And I think on this part, what I've got to do, the tricky part on this is I want most crossbows have the trigger mechanism in front of the trigger, or the string release is in front of the trigger, so it releases the string. Now, with this being short, I want the trigger mechanism or the string release back here, and to get that accomplished, we're going to have to do a three-part mechanism. And I found this out on one of the YouTube channels. I'll try to find the guy who did this and give him some props on it. But basically, this would be the front of the gun over here. This is your trigger. It pushes up on this piece pivots and releases this cylinder for the string. So I've got to make these three pieces. First piece I'm going to start with is the cutting out a circle for the string, and then we'll go from there. Alright, there is my circle. I'm not going to pick it up because it's going to burn the crap out of me if I do. Alright, so I went back to my wire wheel and just knocked off these edges a little bit. And our next step in this process is to cut in the notch where the arrow is going to go. So I think what I'm going to do is drill a hole, and then I'll cut out the notch so that when the arrow, the string, when the string sits in here, it'll sit in that notch, and when it turns, it releases the string. So what I did is drilled a hole, and then I used my scroll saw to cut out the edge, and then I took this round rasp, and put the wheel in the vise and filed out so that it's nice and smooth. Alright, so what I've done here, I got the wheel inside of here, drilled a hole, and we're going to have to come down. I'm going to make it line up right with that, and we're going to cut this off, and then make it go back this way. So I'm going to cut out this part here, and that way when you pull the trigger, the piece that sits right in here will go down and it'll release that. So I'm going to go cut this out and be right back. Alright, so we came back and notched this out. So the next part we're going to make is going to be the piece that goes here up to the trigger. Okay, so I have now fabricated the trigger, a little pendulum, and of course the round circle that lets go of the string. I'm sure there's a name for that. I don't know what it is. I did all this basically by sight. I just kind of looked at the picture here and sat and drew it out with a pencil as I cut it. I cut a little more and draw with a pencil and ended up with this design. And basically the way it's going to work is when we pull the trigger, it'll pull that, this will pendulum that way, and this will release. So now my next step is going to be to hopefully put pins through here to hold it. I found these metal pieces that I cut, and I'm going to try to make pins out of them. Hopefully I can find the right size drill bit to drill a hole and put these through as pins. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I tape down the trigger. Yes, love my tape. Apparently my children have stolen all my blue tape and all the other tape I have around here, and all I have at this point is this funny little duct tape. So alright, so I think what I'm going to do here is actually drill one side first, the piece that's taped on there. I'm going to mark and drill it, And then I'll put the other side on, flip it over, and drill back through the other way. That way it's lined up correctly. Okay, now that we have that drilled through, right there, we're going to come back and put the other side on, this side here. And I'm going to try to clamp it and keep it level. I'll put another piece in between the front and the back, and we'll keep it level. I'll figure out a way to clamp it, and we will flip it over and drill through that same hole. Alright, that should be both sides. I'll clean this up a little bit and we'll see if our pin will go in there. I did the same thing with this one. I measured it all out, or laid it all out, and I taped it down, and I put tape here and here, drilled the hole for the pin. So when the mechanism is, when the bow's cocked and the string comes back here, when you pull the trigger, it will release all that. The string will let go. Now I'm going to put in some stop pins in a couple of these places so it doesn't go too far. You know, you want it to go about right there, so we'll put a stop pin down here, and probably a stop pin behind the trigger or somewhere in here. And we're also going to have to put in springs to push or pull these back into place. So one of these, the spring will pull this, keep this back this way. There'll be a spring here somewhere, so it keeps this back. And then another spring down here. I'll figure that out next. I was going to do some pull springs and have these pull back from here to here, maybe from here to here, pulling these back up. But I think what I'm going to do is use these push springs. I'm going to put one in here and one in here. And what I'll do is I'll notch out, when I do my centerpiece, when I cut out the middle layer for the handle, I'm going to cut in a notch for the spring to sit in, so that it'll sit here and push this back up like that. And then same thing over here, we'll notch in, and when this goes, it'll push and keep it there, so it'll keep it ready for the string to come in. When you push the string in, it'll push the spring. So that's what we're going to try to do now. Okay, so I went ahead and cut out this piece for the string guard and arrow to slide into. I cut out this piece and the handle piece. Next step is going to be to cut in notches for the springs. We're going to put these springs in. One's going to go here to hold this part back. So I'm going to notch in right in here. And then another one is going to notch in right here to hold this piece up, or make it spring back. So that's my next step, is to cut out these notches. I went ahead and notched these out for the spring to sit inside here. And then our next, I notched this wheel out as well, so that, because it would slip off otherwise. So this is part of that fly by the seat of the pants fabrication I do. I said earlier, I don't do blueprints and drawings and all that. I just kind of dig into it and see what happens. So looks like I needed to notch this as well. And it's not all held together, but basically when you pull the trigger, that'll pop back. And then when you put the string back in it, it'll pull back that way. Oops, get my pencil out of the way. Try that again. So you pull the trigger, that'll pop back. Pull the string back in it. This one down here will pop up. Alright, next step in this process, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and take the pieces I've cut here, and I'm going to tape them in place right where I want them. like that. We'll tape that one in place, and then I will drill holes for the mounts. And then on this side we'll do the same thing. So I'll drill one hole on each plate, or I mean a couple holes on each plate, and after I get it from one side, and then once I get those holes drilled, just like before, I'll put the other plate on top, flip the whole thing over, and drill the other hole. That way they'll be lined up. Alright, how I'm going to put this together is these, I went over to the home improvement store and got some of these threaded posts, and nice clean flush posts, so when you put them together, that's what you'll have on each side of the pistol. So I need to make sure that I get the right size shaft or drill bit for this shaft. At this point, what I'm going to do is screw this together and start doing a lot of the finish work where I round off and clean up and get all these rough edges off of here. Get the trigger mechanism fixed, so that'll be what we do next. Okay, so while I'm doing a lot of this cleanup edge work, trying to get this all smooth, try to get this all smoothed out and cleaned up. I'm going to have to figure out how to get all this rounded off inside of here. I'll be using a number of tools that I have around. I've got this sander. I will be using my grinder, which is this here. I will be using, I remembered I had a Ken Onion knife sharpener. I'm not sure how well it'll work, but probably for some of the fine detail, it'll probably, I'll be able to work it like right in here where the trigger assembly is, or the front of the trigger assembly. I'll probably be able to round that out a little bit on there. So just wanted to let you know about all that. Alright, a couple things I forgot and I should have paid attention to. When I put this together and started sanding, I went ahead, in the middle of that, I put my pins back in that hold my mechanism on the inside. And I just taped it for now. I'm going to cut these pins off here in a little bit. But you want to make sure these line up. When you get everything lined up, you want these pins in place before you start sanding everything. Otherwise it could get out of position and the pins won't line up. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is run the inside of the channel right here. So I've got a channel inside of here. Let's see if I can get a picture. There we go. There's a channel right here so that when the arrow sits in here, the feather can run through here. Oh, sorry, there's a plane taking off, sounds like. Hopefully y'all can't hear that in the background. Anyway, there's a channel right there, and I'm going to shave off each side of this so that when the arrow sits in here, it'll actually sit down a little bit and create a little groove. So I'm going to do that next. That looks pretty good. I'm not going to do a whole lot because I don't want this edge sharp. You know, if I put too much of an angle on it, it's going to be sharp, and we don't want that. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I put my pins back in, my barrel connectors, whatever those are called. And I taped them. I found some blue tape, so I just put them on the other side so they won't fall out while I'm working. So we're going to put that, we're going to put all the pieces back in place. These have to move freely, and they're all the same thicknesses as the other parts. So what I'm going to have to do is come in here and put spacers of some sort. I was thinking about washers, which I may or may not do. I haven't decided. Alright, so you can see what I've done here. I went on each one of these pieces and put the blue tape on both sides. And what that's going to do is just give a hair of a difference in the thickness when I bolt this together, hopefully, so that these parts can spin freely inside there. Okay, so part of the fabrication on the fly is seeing what works and what doesn't work. And what I figured out, my tape idea to give a little bit of, it doesn't give enough room for these to move around like I wanted. So just for now, I taped some washers under here just to see, and that actually helped a lot. But what I'm going to do is remove all the tape, the washers, and I'm going to use these. At least I hope I am. Yep, looks like they'll fit good. Little circle rubber washers, and I think that'll work out pretty good. I'll put one on each side, and I'm also going to have to, a couple of things I've noticed when I beveled these edges right here. This piece now sticks up. I don't know if you can see it. Let's move all this out of the way. This piece right here sticks up too much. See, I don't know if you can see it, but it sticks up above the bevel. So when I slide the arrow is actually tapping right there. So I'm going to cut this off even with this bevel so that will work right. And another thing I'm going to do real quick, since before I put it back together, because I'm hoping this is the last few times I'll put it back together. Hopefully the last time. Where the spring goes up into this piece, I'm going to go ahead and notch this piece out a little bit. I don't know where my pencil went. That pencil's horrible, but I'm going to notch this out a little bit in here. I'm going to have to measure it and figure out where I want it. That way the spring won't get off kilter like that. Is that a word? Off kilter? I'm sure it's technical. But if it had a little recess to sit in, it wouldn't move one way or the other. So I'm going to go ahead and notch that just a tad to let that spring sit in there. I also found some other springs I might look at. I went back and got rid of all the blue tape. I shaved this off like we were talking about. And I actually found, when I was digging through my stuff, a whole box of springs, which I didn't find the other day, so it would have been kind of neat. If I'd have found this, I may have ended up doing a pull spring on these instead of a push. But it looks like the push spring is going pretty well. As far as the tape goes, that's part of this fabrication on the fly. I could have edited that out of the video, but pretty much everything in this video is what you see. This is all my steps I'm taking to build this. So that was something I tried, didn't work out real well. You'll see I still have a little bit of blue tape here. I put these new springs in. I'm going to try them. They seem a little stronger maybe than the springs I had in there. I hadn't decided. I may go back to these springs. But problem is when I put them in, this one wants to pop out. So I think what I'll do is probably put the gun back together, and that will hold them in place and they won't pop out. I just want to see how they work. So they look pretty good right now. That one doesn't look long enough to me, but it is working. Just doesn't pop it back as far. I'd like for it to push it a lot further. So I may end up going back to the original springs. Next step, I'm going to put, like I said before, these little washers on each. They're just little round rubber O-rings. So I'm going to put them on both sides of these plates. So we'll put washers on here. And then we'll put this back. And then we'll go back again and put another set. And that should give us enough space to, spacing for all this to work out in here. Yeah, and I think I'm going to go back to my other springs. I'm not too happy with these. I found these too, but they're too big. So at this point, I'm going to put the gun back together with the O-rings and the original springs. Alright, it is put together. I think at this point, well, let me show you how it works. Of course, the string's going to sit in here, pull the trigger, it releases the string, and then when you reset it, I can't get my hand in there, you can see the mechanism come back up and it locks back into place. So it works pretty good. Eventually, when I make the bow limbs, which will probably be the next step, there's going to be a piece of metal sitting in here. So I'll have to drill holes and put a new bolt on both of those. And then that piece of metal will also cover up this pin. So when I cut these pins off, which I think I'm going to go ahead and do, bow limb piece will cover that pin. And then when I make my wooden handle, I'm going to have it come up here and cover up these pins, because something needs to hold them in place. Most of them are pretty tight, but some of them are kind of loose and you don't want them falling out. So we're going to use the handle and the bow limb piece to cover all these. And I cut off the piece in there so that now, I'll grab my arrow. Now the arrow, I guess I didn't mention this either. I left a slot inside of here. That's why I left that channel, so that the feather of the arrow will slide in there. And you can see it slides all the way back now. So that's going to sit in there pretty good. We're probably also going to have to figure out a way to kind of hold this in a little better right in here. I'll figure that out. Like I said, fabrication on the fly. But there we have it. I shaved off the pins. And what I did is I just put them on my bandsaw. Okay, for the bow limbs, we're going to try to make a hybrid bow limb. Essentially what I'm shooting for here is I'm going to do a hybrid PVC fiber rod. So what I'm going to do, let me grab it here. I have this PVC that I'm going to heat and mold just like everybody else is doing on the internet. I've made a bunch of bows out of this type, and then I've also got this fiber rod, which is fiberglass rod. So when I heat and flatten the PVC, I'm going to try to put 2 pieces of the fiber rod inside of it, so when it squishes it down, this will be embedded inside. And then my other goal, this could get a little tricky. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm going to take this piece of steel. It's going to have to be steel because I can't bend aluminum. I wish I could use this same stuff and bend it, but you can't really bend aluminum. It just cracks and breaks. So I'm going to take this piece of steel, and it's going to sit up here and curve back about probably 2 inches. So essentially it's going to make a V shape off of here and come back forward, so that the bow limb will come off of that. I'm going to do one for each side.